Welcome to Pride and Parsippany. I'm your host, Mayor James Barberio, and my guests today are Prosecutor Fred Knapp, Chief Assistant Brad Seabury, and Parsippany resident, which I'm proud to say. First, Prosecutor, I went to your presentation, the outreach program, on September of last year, and I was truly impressed by the presentation. And as a mayor, but more importantly as a father in the community, the outreach on the opium epidemic and prescription drug epidemic. So I want to thank you because I don't know any prosecutors that do this type of outreach, and it's very important for communities like Parsippany as well as the whole entire county of Morris because they interlink from one town to another. And Brad, I was very impressed with your presentation. I got to see many of your presentations. So ladies and gentlemen, I just want you to know that in January, we're doing this presentation here in Parsippany, and we'll keep you updated on our social media, and we will outreach, and hopefully you will come and attend. Let me just, because I got my own cue cards here.
Okay.
I got to go through the statistics, and you guys know them better. The statistics are staggering. More than 12.5 million people admit to abusing opiates, and 4 out of 5 people on heroin started on the legitimate prescription medication. We have to address this problem, and again, I want to thank you both for being here. Can you explain what exactly is heroin and how it affects the body?
Well, heroin is a naturally grown substance that is actually manufactured from opium and from the opium plants. Predominantly, the opium that we have in New Jersey is coming from South America and from Afghanistan. And basically, those of you who've seen this, the plant will grow and they will score the top of the plant, and the poppy rather, and it oozes like a white substance, a gum, that is then harvested and refined into opium. And opium is later manufactured into heroin. So that's obviously part of the problem that we face. The other part of the problem we face, and probably the more pressing problem, is the opioid drugs that are proliferating, not just New Jersey, but all over the United States. So we're dealing with both substances, and now yet a third, which is fentanyl. And Brad can explain more about fentanyl if you'd like.
Yes.
So fentanyl is, it's really troubling because what we're seeing is there's more and more fentanyl in New Jersey and even in Morris County. Unfortunately, we're finding fentanyl mostly at death scenes. It is 50 to 100 times more powerful, more potent than morphine. And really, when someone buys heroin down on the streets, they could buy it in Morristown, they could buy it in Parsippany, they could buy it down in Patterson. They don't know what they're getting. And all too often, it's such a high concentration of fentanyl, they use it since they don't know what they're getting, and they overdose, and in many instances, fatally.
Now, in Morris County, is this epidemic on the rise? Has it been? Because I know there's been a lot of outreach.
Well, all I can tell you is about the statistics we have. Our arrests, narcotics arrests, have increased substantially every year since I've been prosecutor, which will be 4 years actually this month. So we have had a strict enforcement policy, predominantly for profit dealers. Brad heads up the Special Enforcement Unit, which includes narcotics, and our narcotics task force. So we have seen a rise in narcotics arrests because we have actively sought to arrest narcotics drug dealers. And we have utilized task force officers from many of the municipalities. And I'm very thankful that we've had task force officers from Parsippany, from Morristown, and from many of the other municipalities throughout Morris County who really help us tremendously. Our resources in the prosecutor's office are limited, obviously, so we draw upon the 39 municipalities, actually 38 that have police departments, to provide us with assistance, including the sheriff's office, the park police, provide us with additional manpower for our narcotics task force. So we've really been able to ramp up the amount of enforcement we've had. Unfortunately, at the same time, the availability, the affordability, and toxicity of heroin and opioids has increased. So you have these two factors going on simultaneously. And part of Brad's presentation, and you've seen it, Brad does a really remarkable PowerPoint demonstration that will show graphically the increases in drug arrests. It'll also show the increase in the number of fatal overdoses. So we have seen both on the rise. The one thing that really has helped tremendously in limiting the number of fatal overdoses is the use of naloxone, Narcan, if you will, which has been proliferated throughout all of our police departments in Morris County. Every patrol officer in Morris County is provided with Narcan by their municipal departments, and Narcan has been used successfully 100 times, I believe.
So at 95 reversals
Very close.
This year alone. That is up from last year, which was 43. So it's significant. It's significant. And it was actually administered a little over 100 times. So most of the times it is successful. And I'm not sure if every viewer knows what Narcan is. But
I was going to ask you, what's it do?
What Narcan is, it's administered nasally. It looks like a small syringe that has an atomizer, which basically just turns it into a mist. It's administered in the nose, and it's a blocker. So what happens is the opiate is interacting with the brain, certain receptors in the brain. Narcan gets between the receptor and the actual opiate, and it brings someone out of an overdose. What is happening when someone's overdosing is their respiratory system is basically decreasing. They've stopped breathing, and it brings them back because their brain stops interacting with that opiate, and they start breathing again.
And it's virtually instantaneous. Once the Narcan is administered, if it's administered properly, the effects are almost instantaneous. The really good thing about it is also it is harmless if it's administered to someone who is not using opioids. It has no effect whatsoever on them. So it has only a positive effect, and it has been provided to municipalities. We've also had very, very good success. I'll give a plug to Atlantic Health. Atlantic Health has been very, very generous in providing supplies of Narcan at no cost on a somewhat annual basis. I don't want to bind them, but they've been very, very helpful in providing Narcan to municipalities for use on the road. It's also available to the general public. If people, if someone feels that they may have a family member who's abusing opiate drugs, they can purchase the Narcan themselves. It used to be by prescription, but my understanding now is it may be available over the counter.
So certain pharmacies have standing orders that allow them to dispense it right at the pharmacy. I think it's just so critical that it's a tool that we have, and it's something the prosecutor put in place in 2014, and it was fully in place in 2015. And these are police officers that are out there as part of their life-saving mission, giving an addict a second chance. And actually, we like to use that term second chance because they're not truly saved until we can get them into recovery, which is really what we're looking for. It's a hope to break that cycle. And this is important for our overall mission as prosecutors because we have a life-saving mission, of course, and ultimately a crime reduction strategy, which is trying to get people that are suffering from addiction that are often committing other crimes to fuel that addiction to be able to get the funds to buy the heroin. So if we can get them into recovery, we're going to bring down an overall crime rate.
What is the typical path of addiction to heroin?
Well, there are two paths. The one that seems to be the most prevalent that we're dealing with right now is people will become addicted to pain-killing drugs. There's been a proliferation, not just in New Jersey, but throughout the country, of pain-killing drugs that are opioids, such as Vicodin or Percocet. There's a whole panoply of them. And what happens is people may be prescribed them for legitimate purposes. They may have a sports injury. I know, Mayor, you're very athletic. You play softball, you're a weightlifter, you do a lot of things. You've probably had injuries over the years. People will have a knee injury, have knee surgery. It may have been someone who has wisdom teeth removed, children, and what will happen is they will use the properly prescribed medication, but then become addicted to it. And what will happen is they will either, once they run out of the legitimately prescribed medication, they will obtain it unlawfully. They'll obtain it on the street, or they'll steal it from someone's medicine chest, a family member. They'll do doctor shopping, they'll go to different doctors to get as much of this as they can. And it gets to a point where they're not getting high anymore on the meds. They're just preventing themselves from getting sick. And it's a continuing cycle. What invariably will happen is they will use the prescription meds once they can't afford them because they're expensive.
Right.
They're about $1 a gram. Milligram. So they become very expensive because an average pill might be 30 milligrams. So you're talking possibly $30 a pill on the street. And what will happen is they can't afford to buy them anymore. They'll turn to heroin. And the heroin is much, much less expensive.
Right.
And just as deadly.
Yeah.
And as Brad pointed out, the heroin can be mixed with anything. It can be mixed with fentanyl, it can be mixed with God knows what, and become fatal, toxic.
So why is it so hard and difficult to overcome the opiates?
I think the addiction is especially difficult to overcome because of the way that opioids affect the brain, and it changes brain chemistry. And the way that the addiction moves forward is the opioid actually is interacting with the most primitive parts of our brain, the same parts of the brain that crave food or sex or things like that. And because of it and the reprogramming, especially the earlier the brain experiences the opioid, it gets reprogrammed. And it's very difficult then to break that cycle. It can be done, and it is done, and we see people that are successfully in recovery. An important point too is that the prescription opioids are just as dangerous and just as deadly. In fact, nationally, more people are dying from prescription opiates than they are from heroin. Wow. It's the same thing. It's the same chemical. One's synthetic and one's natural, coming from a plant.
And neither Brad nor I are doctors, but in many of the programs we've had healthcare professionals who've spoken about this, who deal with addiction, deal with recovery, deal with treatment all the time. And we've been on panels with them on multiple occasions. We've also worked with recovery specialists here in Morris County to try to get people out of the addiction cycle. And that's a direction we're heading in now, even more so, with the concentration on drug court, and the use of recovery coaches. That's the next step that we'll be embarking on.
Yeah, because I remember you at one of the outreaches at the academy, you said you can't arrest your way into a cure.
Right. You can't arrest your way out of this problem. As much as we try, as many arrests as we make, and we make a lot of them, we're not going to solve the problem just by arresting people.
Right.
We have to treat addiction as a disease. We have to get people into recovery and treatment as much as possible, as quickly as we can.
What would be the demographics of those that use these types of drugs?
Anybody.
Yeah,
and that's the scary thing.
Right.
It's anybody. It's your residents, Mayor. It's my friends. It's people that I grew up with.
Neighbors, family members.
Because of the stigma associated with the disease of addiction, it's often not talked about, so it's often not thought that it could be happening to my family.
Right.
But we know it is. It's happening to the families that would never imagine that it could affect them. And that's what's so scary about this particular disease.
We recently did a webcast, excuse me, with Rabbi Rudin from Adath Shalom. Right. And Rabbi approached us and basically told us that he did not feel that his congregants, his community, recognized that this was a problem. Right. And it's a problem in all our neighborhoods. And he asked us to participate, and I know that Adath Shalom is in Parsippany, and I laud him for doing this. And we had an excellent program dealing with this. We had other professionals there with us, healthcare and otherwise, to get the word out, to educate people. Because often what happens is you get the ostrich response. And people don't want to acknowledge that it's a problem, and it is. Terrible problem.
And that's what brings me to this, and this isn't even on my cue card, but the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, we partnered with the Board of Education. We are head of security now in the schools, but the thing that we have done more now, and we're cooperating with this anti-drug program anti-human trafficking, and anti-bullying. But would you, because I've spoken to the president of the Board of Ed, would you be willing to do a presentation for the kids in the schools? Because that's what we lacked. We would have the, what's it called, DARE program, and it would stop there.
Yeah.
But now we want to go into the middle schools, and that's what we're going to be doing.
Right.
So if you would be willing, you know.
Most of our programs that and Brad has probably done, I don't know, since the last 3 years, maybe 100 programs. I can't even keep track of them all. I try to go to as many as I possibly can and to speak as well. But most of them have been geared towards adults. But I'm sure that we could put something together, Mayor.
Right, because, okay, now, as you know, there's those that are addicted, but there's also something that probably relates to it, is what types of crimes are associated with opiate use?
Virtually any type of economic crime and even violent crime. There's been a proliferation of burglaries, thefts. You have Parsippany and many communities in Morris County has like the big box stores. And the big box stores have been hit terribly by shoplifting, oftentimes to feed addiction. We'll see that. But burglary is very high. We put into place programs to deal with pawn shops, to track stolen jewelry and precious metals that are stolen from people's homes. But it can even be violent crime. It can be street crime. We're very fortunate in Morris County that we don't have the street crime, knock wood, that they have in let's say other more urban counties, without naming them. But we do have a lot of crime in our homes, thefts, that sort of thing, car thefts, you name it. So that feeds the addiction.
Yeah, my impression of the 2,000 to 3,000 indictable cases that come through the office in any given year, that 80 to 90% could be tied back to the narcotics trade, because as the prosecutor said, our property crime, our violent crime often is being done because of the need of narcotics, the need to go get, or as part of the violent drug trade that's associated with it.
Okay, so now we got all that, but let me ask you this question. What are the signs that individuals like myself, a parent, school teachers should look for? What signs that you would...
Well, the first thing I would say, and Brad will get into the specifics, first thing I would say is any significant changes. If you have a child and you see the child behaving differently, there's something going on. If you see the child has new friends or is not with the friends that they've been with over years, those are typical types of behaviors to look out for. Brad can give you more specifics.
Yeah, change in behavior, I think, is the number one that the experts say to look for. Drowsiness, the lack of interest in your typical activities that the person was previously interested in. Money disappearing, items from your home disappearing, jewelry, because all too often the stealing starts in the house. Going to many doctors, and sometimes it's right in the family's face. It's so obvious. The fact that the person is using pills, and it's not necessarily always connected by your average person to realize that is the beginning of that heroin addiction, or an addiction to prescription pills is just as dangerous.
So obviously, this question, I don't know if I'm going to ask it, because no question is a bad question in my opinion when it comes to this, because we have our own police force. So what is the prosecutor's office doing to combat this epidemic? I know you're doing an outreach program, but there's a lot more probably involved just the outreach.
We do multiple things. Right. One is strict enforcement to arrest for-profit drug dealers, and that involves activity throughout Morris County, and we work with other counties. We'll work with, 2 years ago we had a multi-county operation where we worked with Bergen, Passaic, Sussex counties, where we went into the city of Paterson with task force officers and made over 300 arrests. And it was just to show a presence, and the goal was to try to put somewhat of a lid on the open-air drug trafficking that goes on in the city of Paterson. We knew that it would not end the problem, and it obviously has not. But we're hoping to make a point by doing that, and we may be doing something along those lines in the future, who knows. But we do strict enforcement of for-profit drug dealers. We also are now doing educational programs, have been doing them for the last 3 years, getting the word out on programs such as this, going to schools, going to the League of Municipalities. We spoke virtually to any group who'll ask us. We're there. We'll work with the local substance abuse alliances, along with the County of Morris. And now we're going more into the recovery and treatment area. And Brad can speak about the Recovery Coach Program.
So we know, as it was said, we can't arrest our way out of the problem, and we have to break the cycle. And the way to break the cycle is to get the drug user into programs. So we have things like drug court, which allows, through state funding, to put people into treatment facilities to either use outpatient programs or inpatient programs. And the idea is if we can get these people out of that addiction, they're not going to be committing the burglaries and the thefts and the other violent crime. So it's a huge component to the strategy. However, a for-profit drug dealer will always be treated differently in this county, and we will aggressively go after them. We will also aggressively, and we have very successfully done this, is anytime that there's a death in the county, and there's entirely too many at this point from heroin, the prosecutor put in a policy, an approach where not only is the major crimes unit responding and investigating that homicide as a strict liability death, for strict liability death prosecution, but the narcotics unit responds. And if we can't prove the strict liability death, sort of murder, we will go and we will target that drug dealer that was selling that poisonous cocktail that killed that addict. And I don't care if they're standing down on a corner in Patterson or if they're standing on a corner in Parsippany, we're going to find them, we're going to arrest them, and we're going to try to put them in state prison for as long as possible. That's the dealer that needs to go away. Important distinction, because sometimes I think people make kind of put those together, they blend. That's treatment for the addict and still state prison for that for-profit drug dealer.
I can tell you I had surgery last year, and every time I go for, I will not take them. I have never taken, I had surgery on the lower side here, and I have never taken any of those drugs, only out of fear that, it's only temporary, the pain will come back. So, and that's from the education and when I come to these things, and it makes me wonder, like, I get that, you have to have certain types of drugs, but that's my fear, and it's always been my fear. I don't think I've ever taken pain, any of those that you've discussed, because it's,
Well, they have their place, but the problem is that the doctors had, and there's a program called Do No Harm that was targeted at doctors. It was actually a statewide program to educate doctors more on restricting the prescriptions they give. And I personalize a lot of this in programs that we do. But you may have a minor injury where it's painful, and the doctor might prescribe 30 pills, right. 30 days worth of pills. Whereas now doctors are being more educated. We're out there, and other groups are telling them, and they're being trained, give a 7-day right. supply, cut it down, if someone really needs it. We did a program not too long ago at the Meadowood Manor in Randolph, and on the panel there were two healthcare professionals who dealt with this specific issue. And one of them said, look, most pain you can deal with over-the-counter medication, and just slightly increase the dosage. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not prescribing anything. This came from healthcare professionals who deal with this every day. And basically said, you can tolerate the pain. You should be able to tolerate that pain by dealing with the over-the-counter meds. Sometimes you can't. Right. But the key is to try to manage it as much as possible. And what we're learning is that doctors traditionally did not have the type of training in pain management. All doctors did not have that type of training, and now it may be more prevalent.
I've done some research. I didn't do it, my aide did it, but I read it. And in Parsippany, for the year 2016, Parsippany had 25 heroin overdoses, 9 prescription drug overdoses, and I don't have the statistics on how many deaths, although we recently lost 2 adolescents in the past 2 months. And I know you told me about some other statistics. It's concerning as a mayor, and I'll tell you why. And we do everything we can, and I know you do as well. these are, especially in the local, these are individuals, families you know, and individuals I would have never even thought. So it can happen to anybody, and you know it's sad. But anyway, I have to wrap up the program. I got my 5 minutes, 5 minutes. But I got to tell you, this was a great show today, ladies and gentlemen, and I really truly appreciate it, Prosecutor.
Thank you.
And you know, Chief Assistant, for being here today. It's your efforts really, and the cooperation that you have with all the towns that it makes me proud to be a mayor of Parsippany, because we can't do it alone, and it has to be done as a team. And you guys do an outstanding job, and I'm proud that I can go to those events, and I'm glad you're coming to Parsippany. So that being said, I'd like to thank everybody, thank everybody for tuning in to Pride in Parsippany. Before I go, I have a cup here for you, Prosecutor, and for you, Brad. It'd be nice if you put your coffee in there in the morning.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, but anyway, thank you for being on, and happy holidays to both of you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're tied up here, so be careful.
You can't move.
Thank
too
you
far.
again, and God bless you all. Until next time, God bless.